All right. So I want to quickly run over a couple things that come up in Notion, typically with writers when, either you just getting started or if you've used it for a while. And it's really just kind of the general interface and what you can do with it. One of the things to know about Notion, it is entirely block based. And what this really means is, and you may be able to tell it as I kind of mouse over each item, even in this bulleted list, it's got a handle and it's got a number of things that come up for that individual block. And that's really important to kind of realize with Notion is the way that it's structured is each thing is encapsulated kind of within itself. Um, so one of the great things about this is that it gives you a lot of flexibility to kind of move things around to turn an item into a different item. But when you're just starting out and you kind of have a blank page, it can kind of be a little challenging to realize what you want to do with it. So, for example, if I just wanted to say start writing an article, and for the most part, it's just an opening paragraph and then some headers and that kind of stuff. So, simple as just kind of starting. Let's say make a short sentence here, but then I want to say, when I hit enter, I get a new block. So then I want to say add a, header in there. One of the very handy and quick ways to do this is the slash command. So if you just type slash and just start typing like header or head, for example, you'll notice you kind of get the various options that could be. And for me, coming from say like a markdown type thing where, yeah, you can definitely do the the hash marks to do something similar. This is fairly quick as well to kind of create, the same kind of thing, a header here. And then once, of course, you do the enter key, you'll get a whole new block and you can do whatever there. And that's kind of the gist of Notion itself is it's this block-based system where you can kind of quickly write down what you want. But let's say I just want to move this under, you'll notice all I have to do is just kind of drag and drop that block itself, either a large paragraph like down here, or whatever I want to do, and it can easily move around, reorder, and that kind of thing. So it's very flexible in that regard, but with that flexibility means that sometimes it doesn't, it may not always do the things you want it to do. So in general, especially when writing articles, as I kind of showed, you're mostly doing, some text, some headers, images, lists, those kind of things. And within a given paragraph or something, maybe we want to link to something, maybe we want to, highlight as like inline code. So for example, this go to command right there, I would prefer this to be inline code. There's a couple ways to do it. You'll notice that when I selected that text, I get this kind of floating bar there. And you can do a number of things with this. You can either turn this individual thing into other things. You can link to it, comment, bold, and here's our Marcus code. So not only can you do it like that, but what I'm used to doing is highlighting it and then hitting, say, Control E, which in this case does the same thing for the code. For when I'm writing and I know I have these kind of block segments and things, or need to modify code, oftentimes it's just easier to like say Control B to make something bold, or Control E to mark it as inline code kind of thing. So there is some flexibility in the shortcuts and what you're trying to do there. Same thing, when you're trying to make a link as well, if you just highlight what you want and say, make the link, that's really all you have to do. And so then you'll kind of notice you'll get that link there. If oops. So the only one caveat I found with this sometimes, and you'll notice I literally just did it myself, is that even when I hover over this, I see where it's going, but how do I remove that link? The quickest way I found to do that is just kind of arrow back over into the text, and then you'll notice you kind of get this lower section here, and then you can remove link. That's something I found is a challenge once in a while is, oh, wait a second, I have this link here. I can't just like right click it and remove it. And that's kind of the easiest way to do that. So a number of different ways to kind of format text in here. Now, granted, you can do more here. We have pretty specific formatting guidelines for the most part. So, bold for like UI elements, inline code for, certain things. But you can do everything pretty easily within a given, set of text or block without too much trouble there. As you'll notice, like as I said before, you can easily reorder, move stuff around. But for the most part, you can do what you want. And if for some reason you want to turn a whole section of block into something else, well, you can turn, into any number of different things. I can make that a quote if we wanted to, or a header, which would be kind of nuts there. But that's the idea, is like it's pretty easy to do those kinds of things. And if you right click, you can get the same kind of menu there as well. The other thing that comes up a lot is images. So, for this kind of image, all I did was I just copy and paste this image off the clipboard. So I had this from an article, so I just, copy image. Let's just get rid of that for a moment. I just Control V, paste it in. For me, when I'm writing an article, like I'm just taking a screenshot, pasting it right in, really quickly going down the line as I need it. The two things, well, the main thing with this is, when you're doing articles, add a caption, which is just that little caption thing. It could be something simple, but when you're working in Notion, you just have to highlight over and you'll see the caption button there. But one thing that trips people up a lot about images is you'll notice you can move it around same as before, but oftentimes the images fall in an unordered or an ordered list. And then how do you get them to be in the right spot? So for example, you'll notice that, let's see if I can do that again. If I'm over enough, kind of hard to see, but the blue line goes all the way across, right? That kind of centers this. It's not technically in the right spot. You'll notice I have a 1 and a 1 there. The correct way to do this is, if you'll notice, if you get that kind of lighter blue to the left and then the darker blue is where it's going under, that will actually correctly nest this. And that way you can maintain this ordering and it goes to the right spot. So it's super useful when you're doing that. And that is something that trips up a lot of folks. I mean, it's kind of a little bit of pain sometimes, but as long as you just kind of move it to the right spot, you'll notice it stays under that line. And that works even when you've got, sub items. You can still, you'll notice it even moves 3 in on there. So you can still maintain that kind of correct nesting with the images in there, and everything works as you would expect. I can even have other content under that. And you'll notice, here's another trick. So when something like this happens where it shifts down the item there, oftentimes that's just because you have a blank space in there. So like if I remove that blank space, it correctly numbers again. Or I want to enter or add a new numbered item there. Well, that's as simple as just doing like numbered list again in there, and it just picks up the fact that it's no longer a blank line, but it's there. So if I have that, and then I can hit tab, for example, to shift it further down, and you'll notice it does maintain the correct ordering in there, or shift tab will move it back. But you can tell though that it's pretty flexible, and you can even drag and drop these individual items and the numbered items, and it'll reorder correctly. So I found that with images, this is one of the easy ways to kind of make sure everything's lined up in the right spot and it looks good, is as long as you're paying attention to where that line is, either within a block or, this one is all self-contained within this block, but As long as it's in the correct section and you can tell by that little lighter highlighted section, then it'll work pretty well. So, that's something that comes up a lot in terms of, well, how do I get this to go in the right spot? So hopefully that helps. In terms of converting managing blocks, I did kind of touch base on this a little bit, but for example, here's a bit of code. I would just like this to be in a code block. If you just highlight like the text block you have, or multiple text blocks if you want, you can click and basically just say turn into what you need. In this case, I want to turn into code. Here, you'll notice it put in the code a little section. I can choose the language. In this case, it's shell essentially. And there are some other things you can wrap the code. You can actually comment within here and those kind of things if you need it. But that's the gist of this. You can technically caption the code, though we don't typically do that. So when you're needing to convert stuff around, as I mentioned before, like you can change it to a header, quote. The other one we use often is a call out. So, hey, this is a call out. So all I had to do was either do one of two things. I could just say start typing / and what I want and start typing it, or I can choose, convert an existing one. If you're just kind of writing down pretty quickly, then it's easy to go back and convert that stuff. And then since we do want these callouts to be italicized, that's as simple as just selecting it all and either hitting the italicized button or just Control I to do it. But as you can tell, it's pretty quick to format all this stuff and change it to what you need. And as before, like I can even nest that shell under there or this call out under there. It's very flexible in terms of how you want to format. So the other thing that comes up is tables. Tables are a bit unique in Notion. They are not your traditional tables as you would think like Word or anything. Someday, I hope that they do have that and it is on their to-do list. But what they really are is like an inline relational database, which doesn't really do us any good for articles, but they kind of approximate what you want. So when we export and put them into WordPress, they're still functional. But when you're doing like an inline table, you see what you're really getting is a pretty complex item here. You can change the property type. Well, there's always going to be a title property, same name, but then for each column, these are all sorts of different things, formulas and relations and stuff. I mean, when you're doing an article, you're not really touching that stuff because it doesn't do any good. So most of the time, you're just going to have a text title. You got to put some text in there. Oops. However you might need to, keep hitting the open button and that kind of thing. But you'll notice one of the things about tables is that they're actually a self-contained page. Each line item is its own page. Like this is an entire page, and each line item is a page, or each row. So as I said, these are actually pretty powerful. The downside is that they're not kind of simple tables that we're used to using with like Word or like Markdown or anything. They will work for what we need to do when writing. They might be a little more cumbersome, but something to keep in mind is you can do this. You can even paste in tabular content and it will attempt to usually put it in a table like this. Sometimes some cleanup is needed, but for the most part, it's just important to know that they are not your typical tables. They're pretty cool if you're using Notion outside of an article, but for this, it's really just kind of try to fit it best you can in there, and let us know if you're having trouble, or let me know, and we can try to figure out a good way to handle it. And then comments, especially when we get to the editing side of things, there's usually a couple things about the comments that come up, is, for example, if I make a comment on a bit of text, right? So I'm going to say, this is a comment, it's highlighted. You can see that there's a comment on this block because there's just a little speech bubble next to it, and you'll see all of the ones there. One of the things we want when you're editing, or when we're editing and doing the back and forth, is, don't actually resolve the comments. We'll do that. Otherwise, we have a hard time knowing what ones are taken care of. Just say, take care of whatever the comment's asking, and just make a comment back yourself. This one is done. Granted, there'd be another line here if you were doing it, but and then once we're done, we'll click the resolve and it will go away. But something that often comes up is, wait a second, I need to refactor this whole sentence into something different. And because of that, I'm probably going to lose this comment, and we don't really want to lose that comment. It does require a little bit of finagling to do correctly, but essentially, instead of what I've done is just try to keep one part of the comment alive, even if it's just a space. So for example, I could say, I need to get rid of all this, right? Somewhere, I want different points. I'm just going to say somewhere else. Well, what I could do is delete everything around it, and then you just leave that one space. It's kind of weird. And how you do it sometimes is part of another word or something, but it does maintain that comment there. Obviously a little hard to see, but because we can tell it's on the block, we know it's still there. So however you want to do it, either by keeping a letter in a part of another word or whatever it might be, that's basically it. And honestly, even if you were to keep it on its own line, because like I can make a space down here, right? You might not be able to see it, but as long as I highlight it, I can make a comment on that space. So even if this comment were maintained, but you just put it down below or something, that's good enough usually. We just want to make sure we're not missing something. So that's really it with comments. Just respond to them, don't resolve them, we will, and then try to keep them in the whatever your text is to make sure that we don't miss anything while going through the process. Overall though, Notion is pretty quick once you get in the flow of it. There are a couple little things, with the images and, inline formatting that you might want to learn, but hopefully this gives kind of a good overview of what you can do with it, some of the common issues. And then I'm going to open it up to questions, and I'll stop recording here somewhere.